The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 122 with Dr. Bhrett McCabe, author of the Mindside Manifesto.
We have a goal of where we want to achieve it, but we have to have a mindset of how we're going to achieve it. And it's that relentlessness, it's that desire, it's that grit, it's that fire, it's that belief, it's that want that helps us achieve it. And that's what happened to me when I wrote the book.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. I am back, Jeff Pellizzero. In case you missed it last week on episode 121, the show was hijacked by our buddy Coach Glass, Jason Glass from the Coach Glass podcast. Came on and did a little bit of a reverse interview where he turned the tables and actually interviewed me for the show. So we talked about 18 Strong, how it started, what's happened in the last 2.5 years since we began 18 Strong, kind of what our mission is. And, he just kind of dug in on me a little bit, which is, I have to say, was a little bit strange to be on the other side of the microphone, especially knowing that I'm talking to you guys, everybody that I talk to on a weekly basis. But I was being fired the questions on. So it was definitely a cool interview, great experience. Jason is one of the guys that I've looked up to for so long in this industry, and it's really one of the guys that kind of inspired me to go further down this path of golf and fitness, and even, to step out of the box and do the 18 Strong podcast and start 18 Strong. So once again, Jay, I want to thank you for just the opportunity to have you come on the show again for the second time, and for everything you've done over the past couple of years. And also to let me repay the favor and go on the Coach Glass podcast and kind of hijack that episode and flip the script on him as well. So if you didn't listen to episode 165 of the Coach Glass podcast, go check that out, where I get to drop in and do the same for Jay. This week we have actually one of Jay's great friends and a good friend of mine, Dr. Bhrett McCabe, on the show. And he has also been a former guest on the 18 Strong podcast many, many moons ago. Episode number, I think probably episode number 6 maybe. So very, very early on in the show. And like I said, he's become a great friend, another guy that I really look up to in the industry. Let me just give you a little bit of background on Dr. McCabe. He's a licensed clinical psychologist, got his PhD degree in clinical psychology from LSU with an emphasis in behavioral medicine, and did a pre-doctoral internship at Brown University, which is one of the top in the nation. He's a practicing sports and performance psychologist who works with numerous athletes from the PGA Tour, LPGA Tours, NFL, NBA, MMA, and he serves as a sports and performance psychologist for one of the largest and most successful Division I colleges, athletic departments in the country. Dr. McCabe has published several academic journal articles, as well as contributed to magazines such as Golf Magazine, Golf World, ESPNW, and quite a few others. What I really love about Brett's perspective is that it's not just based on his clinical practices and his academic studies, which obviously are impressive enough, but being that he was an elite athlete himself, he pitched at LSU during his undergrad years and actually won 2 national championships with them. So he's able to blend his clinical knowledge with his own experiences, his own personal experiences in sport, as well as his interaction with some of the world's best athletes, coaches, and leaders who he works with on a regular basis these days. So he's here to talk this time about his new book, which I'm so excited about, called the Mindside Manifesto. And I'm gonna warn you, this episode gets a little bit deep. And as you've known, you've probably seen kind of the theme of what's going on with 18 Strong. I really feel like it's that we're on a mission to help empower you as the golfer, and not just in a sense of, making you stronger, making you more fit, or helping with technique, things like that. But what I've really come to understand, and especially getting feedback from a lot of the audience and talking with different people listening to the show, different coaches, different golfers, is that it's really about the habits that we build. It's about the accountability that we seek out. It's about the resilience that we have going into whatever endeavor it is, whether that being a better golfer, being more fit, being stronger in the gym, or simply doing something outside of the whole health and fitness and golf side. So what we talk about today is, what is your manifesto? What is your public declaration of how you see the world? And so some of the topics that we get into this week are the topic of doubts versus beliefs. How do you overcome those doubts that you have whether that be in your work or your golf game or whatever. And Dr. McCabe tells us, the doubts that he had. Writing this book was one thing that he had to overcome some of those fears and some of those doubts. And it's a great story on how he overcame those and produced a phenomenal product. We also discuss the idea of capability versus capacity. So when you're in the moment, when you're at the height of performance, what do you rely on? What is your capacity to perform? And then one of my favorite parts of the whole episode is when we discuss 5 daily things that most successful people do on a daily basis that you can actually start implementing tomorrow that Dr. McCabe lays out for us 1 through 5. So you might want to get a pen and paper to get through this episode, because you either are going to be listening to it a couple of times like I'm going to, or you might want to jot some of these things down. Now, I want to take just a few seconds here to say thank you to our longtime friends and our sponsors for today's show, which is Super Speed Golf. By now, you should know all about Super Speed Golf and the fact that if you haven't tried them, you are definitely missing out. So let's face it, we all want to swing faster, right? We all want to outdrive our buddies, and that's all right. It's acceptable. In fact, I even heard Rory McIlroy recently in an interview, kind of reluctantly, but he admitted that when he was in the Ryder Cup playing with Thomas Pieters and they were playing against DJ and Brooks Koepka, it kind of jazzed him up a little bit when he saw that their balls were flying a little bit farther than DJ and Brooks on a couple of holes. So just like Rory, it's okay to admit that you just want to swing faster, hit the ball further, and outdrive your buddies. So it's no secret that I've been using these Super Speed clubs for a while now, and both for my clients and personally. And it's the one thing that has made the biggest difference in increasing swing speeds for sure. It's not just my experience, but I'd say that the majority of the people that I know on my side of the business, on the fitness side, the training side, are using it with their clients because they flat out work. So actually, you may have even seen, we retweeted recently a video of Billy Horschel. He posted himself using the Super Speed golf clubs in his home. And I'm telling you, these things are making waves. So if you want to check them out, all you have to do is go to their website, superspeedgolf.com, to find out more information, see what the whole club system is and how it works. They've even got protocols on there for you to start using. And once you're ready to ramp up your overspeed training, make sure you use the code 18STRONG to get your 10% discount. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. As I hope you already know, I take a lot of pride in who comes on the show and especially what products we endorse here. So if it's something that I'm mentioning here in the sponsorship setting, it's definitely something that I believe in. It's something that I've tried. It's something that I use. And it's something that I guarantee will definitely help you in some way on this journey of yours. So again, check them out at superspeedgolf.com and use the code 18STRONG. All right, speaking of things that are going to help you along on your journey to improving your game, improving your life, improving your fitness, it's declaring your Mindside Manifesto. So let's get to the interview with Dr. Bhrett McCabe. Dr. Bhrett McCabe, welcome back to the 18 Strong podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
I was just kind of looking through the list of episodes here. You were the 6th episode on the 18 Strong podcast, and now this is, I believe, episode number, we're in the 120s. This is either 121, 122, depending on when this goes out, but it's kind of crazy that it's been that long and that you were kind enough to come on without even really knowing anything about me or the podcast or 18 Strong in the early days, and now to see the friendship that we've built, the communication we've had, and just the things that have gone on in our worlds has been crazy. So thanks again for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me and being one of those guys early on that you wanted to leverage the start of your podcast on. And I'm impressed by your growth. I'm impressed by your reach. And also the impact you make. And I think you have emerged in every facet of how you've done. I mean, every time I go on social media, there's somebody standing there in an 18 Strong t-shirt. And so, I think you've done an incredible job. The content of the podcast is excellent. It's an honor to be here. It's like when you watch a Friends episode and you go back and watch the early episodes and now you listen to the later episodes, you can see such an amazing growth of the value of what you bring and everything. So kudos to you and congratulations.
Well, I really appreciate that. And, I think it's really neat to see what has happened with both of our careers. But, when you were on podcast last time, one of the big topics that we talked about was the idea of, the fishbowl and breaking through your fishbowl. And if you guys didn't hear that episode, go back to episode number 6, and I highly encourage you to listen to that. But what I think is neat is this past year, you've kind of increased the size of your fishbowl by this whole project that you have called the Mindside Manifesto, with writing a book. I know that that's been a project that's been on your list for a long time. What finally made you decide to go ahead and finish this book, put it out to the public, and then I want to talk about the name, the Manifesto?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that happens in our field and as a psychologist is that, you have credibility when you write a book, and I've always resisted that, but it's true to a degree, right? But I've resisted it because I just didn't want to write another book that went through the traditional psychology mentality of visualization, routines, and stuff. Those books have been written and they're excellent, and there's no need to write another one. I don't think there's any novel nuances that I could put in there that would really make a difference. But, this book speaks to a larger trend with me in my life. And I think sometimes we have to take a step back and take a look at trends. And it's something that's going on in my life right now. And it's I've always believed that if we don't learn our lessons, we repeat them. And this book was something like that for me. And one of the things I've always done in my life is I've always been a connector. I've always believed I needed to connect with somebody else to have success. Doesn't mean I didn't think I could stand alone, but I didn't know if I could stand alone fully and be successful. And when I started as a psychologist, I worked in pharma for a long time, for about 8 years, had real good success, great job, a lot of stability, but I just wasn't fulfilled. And I wanted to do something else. And I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know if it could be done. And there's not a lot of psychologists, clinical psychologists, that are fully independent of sports and performance that make a good living. And I was making a really good living in pharma. And so with kids, one starting high school at that time and one in middle school, I just didn't know, as the sole breadwinner of my family, if I could do it on my own. And I had partnered with somebody to kind of create a novel idea. And by doing that, I kind of gave up my power of who I was as an independent psychologist, but I thought it was necessary. It didn't go well. And the business, I eventually left the business because we couldn't agree on the way the business was being run. And it was a very painful experience. I did it again in another form and fashion where I felt that I needed people to grow my business, and hired individuals, when the truth was I was deferring to them instead of listening to me. The book is the same thing. So, I keep having to look back at my life and go, okay, whenever I feel like I need somebody else to do something for me in order to fulfill something that I doubt about myself, it always fails. And writing the book was that, because I've always been somebody who enjoys writing, but I've always looked at other writers and overvalued, but really been inspired by the way that other writers capture words and visions. And that was daunting to me, and that was intimidating to me, because I'd read other people's works and I'd say, God, that is so eloquent. And I went to LSU and I did my doctorate at LSU. I don't write like that. And I had partnered with a guy who covered me when I pitched. And I called him and I said, hey, I'm writing this book. I'm going to self-publish it because I just feel like that's the way to go in the industry now. Would you be interested in being a co-writer? I'll write it, but I want you to create the essence of the book. I want you to take my words and I want you to make them there, because I don't believe I can stand alone. And it's that common theme came back up. And so we got started, and we had some delays. I produced it. He couldn't get things done. And I knew that going in. I knew that he had historically, because I'd known him for 20 years and had seen him work in projects that I was related to. He was an extraordinarily talented writer, but he tended to write at the last minute. And I couldn't afford to write at the last minute because we had established an entire plan of how we were going to roll out the book. And I got to a spot where we kept missing deadlines. And when he would send back my writing, I didn't like the way he captured what I was trying to say. And it created a tremendous amount of angst in me and anxiety in me, because I felt like I had good content, good themes, but not good writing. And so I put the book away for a while. And how it got started was I started with the idea of, and he challenged me. He said, just start writing content that makes sense to you. And then we'll write a book because of it. And I thought, okay, he said, too many people try to write books and theme it and write the beginning, middle, and end before they've written the first word. He said, I want you to take a step back, and I just want you to say, these are things that I'm passionate about. And so I started writing things from a stance of, what are the things that my athletes struggle with? Where do they struggle in their games? Where do they struggle in their lives? And I've always been a guy who goes deeper than the content with a player. It's not just about the fact that you're struggling on the putting green or you're struggling in the free throw line, but I want to build that person up even more from a psychological disposition. And so I started writing some of those common traps. And through that, I started doing a lot of reflection of my own experience. And all of a sudden, I woke up one night, and we'll talk about the title in a minute. I was like, this is going to be called the Mindside Manifesto. But then I pulled back and I said, why? I mean, just because there's common traps to the mental game, that doesn't sound like a manifesto. And I've always told my story about when I played at LSU and how my life changed on one night in March of 1994 when I got challenged by my coach in a way that was not very comfortable. It wasn't inappropriate. It just challenged me to the core of what I did because I was so afraid to succeed. And he challenged me, and he did it 2 nights in a row, and it was very painful. He grew my fishbowl. And I started writing that, and I started looking. I was like, wait a minute. My experiences were really learning how to create a mindset that night in March of 1994 has set the stage for where I am in my life today. And despite that, I don't need anybody to do it for me because I'd always been waiting for that. And so I called, it was the day after my birthday, and I called the writer and I said, hey buddy, I said, listen, I want to thank you for everything, but I'm gonna do this on my own. And I went back into the book and I started writing again. And all of a sudden the book came together. And, obviously I had some editing help, and my wife was tremendous as an editor. And then we hired a professional editor to kind of make sure it's all there and everything was captured appropriately in the industry. And he called me back and said, this book's excellent. He said, it's very easy for me to do this. And, but the capture of the Mindside Manifesto is the fact that it's such a reflection of me that when I look in the mirror, I see somebody who wants things, but sometimes is afraid to declare what I really want. But in order for us to be successful, we have to fully declare what we want. We have to fully declare the mindset that's going to help us achieve it. Because if we're not willing to do that, the only person we're failing is us. And for me, in every facet of my life, when I have stood alone and stood on my own merits and my own vision and not deferred to other people, doesn't mean I don't learn from other people. But when I have stood out there and said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do, I've done it. And I've done it with tremendous success. But when I've deferred to other people, or I've said, I need somebody else to help me be successful, I have failed over and over again. And that's essentially what the book is. The book is how to create an urgent competitive mindset. Look, when you wanted to start 18 Strong, people probably said, oh, you need to do this or that. Oh, it's probably not going to be. Oh, there's already others in the genre. But you had a desire for what you wanted it to do. And if somebody asked you, you didn't hesitate to say why you wanted it. That's why I did your podcast at first. You said, I want to do this. I didn't know you. But I was like, if a guy's going to reach out to me and ask me to be a part of his podcast and he has a vision for where he wants to go, why wouldn't I do it? Because that's contagious. And when the book came together, it was like a thread that just that tied shoes together. To me, all of a sudden, the book went from my story to what people can learn, but then a practical application of how to create an urgent competitive mindset. Jeff, way too many people let life live them. They sit in the back seat of the roller coaster and they take the ups and downs as if that's the best that they can do. Very few people fight to get to the front to be the pilot of their ship, but yet that's what life demands of us, to get to the front of the ship and to drive our boat. There's this movement in the mental game of thinking that we are just byproducts and we're just along for the ride. And nothing could be further from the truth. We are the active pilots of our life, interacting and flowing through the environment and following our visions. We have a goal of where we want to achieve it, but we have to have a mindset of how we're going to achieve it. And it's that relentlessness, it's that desire, it's that grit, it's that fire, it's that belief, it's that want that helps us achieve it. And that's what happened to me when I wrote the book.
Wow. I mean, everything there is just so powerful, and you've captured so much. And I'll be the first to say that, starting something like a podcast or writing the book, like the Bogey Proof Workout book, it was scary. It was, there's so many doubts that come up. There's so many fears that, is this going to be good enough? This is going to be permanent. When I put it out, it's out there. People are going to be able to critique it. People are going to be able to like it or not like it. And it's tough. And I would say that everyone listening to this podcast at some point goes through that thought process of, am I good enough? Is what I'm doing as good as the other guy? Can I do this alone? And I feel that just as much as anyone else with these shows and everything that I do here. And so I know that everyone listening, whether it be around their golf game, whether it be around, what they're doing weight loss wise or in their job, they all go through these different doubts. And one of the topics that I read through when looking through the book was the idea about these doubts versus beliefs. And I know that you have kind of a process of working through some of these doubts and beliefs and really kind of bringing them to light so you kind of stare them in the face and kind of figure out what you need to do with those. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, when you listen to clients, a lot of times what you hear, I want to do this, but, and those doubts come up. And every day we face doubts. Doubts are normal, but doubts are also contagious. They blend together. They feed off one another. They're like a virus that just multiplies. Because when we give an environment of doubt, all we do is feed more doubts. Okay, I know that's a weird way to look at it, but the truth of the matter is, as we go and challenge ourselves, and as we continue to rise to new challenges and new thresholds, the question is always there is, can I do it? And when that question of can I do it pops up, then the question goes to, well, what about this? What about this? How about that? And then we start over-evaluating other facets, and they're all doubt-based. But if we don't get out of our fishbowl, if we don't expand our horizons, then we get comfortable, and we start living in a world of comfort versus a world of growth. All growth requires growing pains. And so I was working with some athletes one day at Alabama, and I have a whiteboard behind my chair, and we were talking, and I kept hearing about it, and I kept saying, well, let's write out these doubts that you have. And when I wrote the doubts out, the athletes all looked at them and kind of laughed. And we did it independently, but they looked at it and they were like, it's really not that bad. Like, yeah, it's amazing how powerful doubts are between our ears, but they're really powerless on paper. But when we keep them in our head, they're just overwhelming. I said, now I want you to do something different. I said, I want you to write on the other side of the whiteboard what you believe in yourself. And man, that was powerful. It was so powerful, because what happened was they started buying into, why would they invest in themselves? I tell all my athletes, you got to think that you're a new business. Why would somebody invest in you? You got to tell me why, not because what you don't do well, but what you do well. That's the factor that I'm going to get contagious about. And, I sat there and I put that information together and started playing it. And then I had a guy on my podcast who is, I don't want to say attempted to climb Mount Everest, because that's a really bad misrepresentation, because everybody attempts it that goes. He's been on the mountain 3 times, has had 4 expeditions to go. One time he didn't make it because the earthquake hit. He was in the airport and he ended up turning back. He was on the mountain when the avalanche hit and killed, I think, 27 people at base camp. Wow. And he's been brought down the mountain twice for illnesses. Once was kind of this benign thing, which happens. The other one was this past year because he thought he had a high altitude pulmonary swelling. But the truth of the matter was he actually had some cardiac issues that they fixed. But he started talking about the drive of climbing the mountain. And he said, so many people get summit fever, where all they can see is the summit and they ignore everything else. And I was thinking, well, that happens with athletes, but the vast majority of athletes see the summit and they think about all the pain and struggles and what's it going to be like, and can I do this, and do I have this, and all the doubts that pop in their head as they're climbing. And I said, well, how do you handle that? And he said, your beliefs have to overwhelm your doubts, and you just put one foot in front of the other and you trudge on. And I started thinking, I was like, well, wait a minute here. When I was working with my athletes, we were getting our beliefs at 2 times more powerful than our doubts at minimum. So I put together this based on that interaction of understanding how athletes is that when we become successful, our beliefs become two times, it's beliefs squared over doubts. And we have to work to reframe the situation, cognitively reframe the situation and go, I hear the doubt, but it's meaningless. I'm going to invest in my strengths. So, I always use the example, right, of an airline pilot who looks at an airplane and goes, he doesn't go, I hope I can land it. He goes, this is how I'm going to land it because I know I'm good at what I do. I never want a surgeon, as you know, I had my hip replaced and I always laugh. I said, I don't want a surgeon who tried med school.
Yeah.
I want a surgeon who went in and said, I am going to be the best damn surgeon I can possibly be for the patients that sit before me. And it takes that arrogance, but it's that belief. Now, sometimes that gets people in trouble, right? That's when summit fever kicks in. But as you know, if you're sitting here listening to this podcast and you're like, well, I think I could do this. I think I can do that. I want you to just take a piece of paper and on one side, write everything you doubt about yourself. And then on the other side of the paper, I want you to write down everything you believe in about yourself. And it's easy to start the doubts. They'll come very quickly. And what you'll find is those doubts will tend to revolve around two or three things in your life. They're going to be the same thing. They're going to all relate. We're just saying it in different ways, but it's going to look overwhelming. The truth of the matter is it's two or three things. But what we find different is once we start understanding what we do well and what we start believing in, it's transformational. Because what happens is we start buying into the man in the mirror, the woman in the mirror. We start saying, wait a minute, if I can believe in you, above all else, and I can look at that man in the mirror and know that I have a plan and a process in place, and I can believe in me to be that factor of change, what else is there?
Yeah, I think in one of our previous conversations, we were chatting about some of the greatest athletes that you've had the pleasure of working with, and one of the mental pieces that they had was and this might have even been us talking about you in your baseball days, was when you step on the field or you step on the first tee box or, basketball court, whatever it might be, or in the boardroom ready for a presentation, part of that overcoming the doubts is knowing that you've put the work in, and you have to basically just trust that you've put that work in, you've done what you had to do, you have prepared as well as you could prepare, and now it's go time.
Well, let's introduce a new topic here, and it's briefly covered in the book, but it's something that since I've written the book has really become more of a dominant theme, and when I work with athletes, and it's exactly what you're talking about. So as athletes, as people in life, we have two circles. We have two content. So I want you to think about them if you're listening to this podcast. On one side of the page, you have this circle that's pretty large, and it's called capability. It is your overall capability to meet demands it's like your potential. When you train, when you practice, you're growing that capability ball. And that living, breathing energy ball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. And so when we're training, when we're learning new skills, sometimes the ball gets smaller based on injuries or based on limitations that we have. But the goal is to grow that to be the biggest thing that we have. It's powerful, right? We all want to be that 5-star athlete. But we also have to understand what our capabilities are. I can't run a 4.40. Okay. So I have to know what my capabilities are. Right. I have to know that, when I step out on the field, what I'm capable of, because if I'm trying to do what I'm not capable of, I'm going to lose my game. I'm always going to fail. I got to know what I do very well. So I got to know the inherent nature of who I am. That's my capabilities. So it takes a lot of reflection. It takes a lot of evaluation and testing and looking and feedback going, okay, I get it. This is what I am. I mean, Chick-fil-A sells chicken. I get it. That's what I do. Okay. But the other circle is what I call capacity. And in the moment in the competition, capacity is how much we meet the demands of the challenge. What's our capacity to meet that demand? The capacity is always a circle that's a percentage of your capability. It's never going to match your capability 100%. Maybe one time in your life when you have that magical moment, right, where you fully maximize your potential. But it's always going to be a percentage of. But great athletes, the Michael Phelps, Michael Jordans, Derek Jeters, Tom Brady's, Russell Wilson's, Serena Williams, you name it. They maximize their capacity every single time because they're not worried about taking their capacity and proving their capability. They trust what they're capable of, but they meet the demands of the moment by doing what it takes. But when we're trying to validate our capability or prove our capability with our capacity in the moment, we're not staying present focused. It's the ability to meet the demands of the moment that makes a great athlete by trusting that their skill set is the capacity to compete in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in many ways, it's having the confidence in what your potential is and what you've already worked towards, but then
correct.
Not necessarily saying, okay, I got to prove that I'm the greatest guy on the court. I just have to get done what I need to get done here in this moment.
Correct. And so what happens is athletes too often get caught up on why they're not meeting their capabilities. So that's the reduction and why the capacity is smaller. And there's all kinds of factors that are in our control and out of our control. Some are doubts, some are fears, some are weather, some are bad lane assignments, bad luck, just you name it, it's something. It's just some reason as to why we're at 80%. But if you're focused on the 20% that you're missing versus the 80% that you have, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. But athletes are conditioned to think about what they're missing versus what they have. That's why underdogs succeed, because they've given up what they don't have. They know they ain't got it. They've got some limitation that is preventing them from being successful in the mind's eye or the media eye or something. People are going, oh, there's no way that player or that team can meet this. But all of a sudden, they fully believe in their capacity in the moment, and they start winning. Okay, but as athletes, we have to know that capacity. And my job is to try to empower players. And this, I want people listening to this to go, wait a minute, maybe I don't have the budget to create a marketing department, but I've got Google, right? Or I can ask somebody who's done this before, and I can do some things on my own. Or maybe as a player, I don't throw at 97 miles an hour, but I can learn how to throw a circle changeup. And I can believe fully in what I have versus fearing or disappointed in what I don't have. And if I can set myself into understanding how to maximize my capacity every single day by believing who I am, I maximize my impact. That's why Michael Phelps never lost a big race. He wasn't trying to prove what he was fully capable of. He was just trying to beat you in the moment.
Right.
Everyone else was trying to prove and measure against him. He didn't care. The greatest example of that is the year that Ryan Lochte geared up, and everything was geared up to how he was going to challenge Michael Phelps, and Michael went out and beat him and everything. It wasn't even close because his goal was just to beat that guy in the moment. Now, his capability was probably the best ever, but he wasn't trying to prove it. He was, I just want to race. I just want to race. And that's the mindset that we have to have.
And so when you look at those two circles, you've got capability on one side, capacity on the other, just as a visual. What are the ways, I'm assuming that your training, your practice, that's a way to broaden your capability circle? And is it the bigger your capability circle is, the more likely you are, or maybe I shouldn't say the easier it is, to reach your capacity? What's the relation there?
Yeah, well, if you assume that your capabilities are just going to show up, the game is going to pass you by. So you also have to train your competitive mindset in the moment, right? You've got to train how to apply. So that's why we challenge ourselves. That's why we enter squad. That's why we do competitive drills. That's why we do performance drills. And we have to learn what those it factors are, those moments that when I step out on the mound or somebody gets in the rink or somebody gets in, what's the chip on the shoulder of the boxer that gets on the inside the ring? Those thoughts, right? That's maximizing capacity. But it's the ability to say, I have done everything in my power to be prepared. Okay, now let's go create magic with it. And if we do that, that's where we get successful. But if we go out there and say, I hope I show everybody what I've done, I hope I prove all that hard work worked, that's where we get in trouble. But if we go into it and say, I'm good, regardless of what happens in this event tomorrow, I know what my capability is. And if I do that, I often watch like UFC fighters because even the best lose, right? They get caught by an upper right, a right hand or something like that. But we can look at like a Conor McGregor and say, man, his capability is really good. But what's amazing about him is his capacity to compete in the moment, even though he's lost, I think, is at a level that few get to, because he's able to separate that need to train and that belief to make sure that he's the best he can be. But he also trains to maximize his capacity. That's why he competes in everything that he does. So it's learning how to compete, and it's learning how to have that mindset to maximize capacity is what we have to train. But players fall into a gap in all sports of, well, I've done this, I've done that, I've worked hard. Okay, great. I can tell you a number of athletes that have succeeded that haven't worked hard. Does that mean that you're going to be better? Like, I had an athlete one day tell me, one of my pro golfers, well, I mean, I eat right, so I'll play better golf. And I said, you eat right, so you'll play better golf. I said, is there a direct correlation? What? I mean, I guess. I'm like, no. I said, there's a lot of fat guys on tour. I said, it reduces their likelihood, but they can do just as good as you. So I said, I want you instead to look at your nutrition as an investment in your capability. You're making investments. It's not a mandate. It's just an investment. And why do we work out? Well, perfect example of building capability and capacity is, why do we work out? I mean, is a deadlift that I'm doing today going to really increase my capacity later in the afternoon? I can't put a direct link there. But if I invest in why I'm doing the deadlifts to help stabilize me in a certain facet and movement that reduces variation and increases strength, so that when that demand is called upon, I can meet that demand without having to think about it.
Right. I like that. I like that, thinking of it as an investment, not necessarily like, if I do A, that means B is going to occur. But since I'm doing A, I'm working towards different goals that are going to make me a better golfer. I still have to perform. I still have to react. I still have to do all of these things.
Correct. Look, here's a perfect example in business. You have a lot of business people who listen to this podcast, right?
Yep.
Who started. So everyone says location, location, location. Great. You can go and invest in the greatest location for your gym, your restaurant, your business, whatever, prime location. But if you can't create the culture when people walk through the door of why it's the best place to be, it doesn't matter the location. There's story after story after story with gyms and businesses starting in the worst part of town and becoming a cultural phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't need to be at the prime real estate corner. Now, does it help? Yeah, it can help. It's an investment. Okay? But it's the culture that's created. Well, that's the same culture of capacity. Is, I always, in all my talks, I compare and contrast McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. McDonald's, when I was a kid, used to be the place you stopped when you had to go to the bathroom when you were on the road because it was clean. Okay? And then somewhere along the line, they lost their way. They lost the commitment to excellence. If I have to go and get a drink, I go to the soft drink dispenser and it's sticky, it's wet. There's always something floating in the reservoir, probably like a straw container or something like that. Hopefully that's all it is, but there's probably fruit flies. I mean, come on, it's the ketchup dispenser is always sticky. But if I go to a Chick-fil-A, I can guarantee you what their condiment station is going to look like. It's going to be organized, it's going to be clean, and there's probably going to be somebody stocking it.
Yeah.
And you look at that and you go, okay, what's the difference there? One is about execution, and the other is about, it's good enough. We have to be Chick-fil-A, where we have a continuous desire to improve the way we execute, because our customers, our game, it's not just going to happen because we're McDonald's and people, McDonald's is going to sell plenty of cheeseburgers. They're going to make their money. But why are they losing market share? Because they're not, now all of a sudden McDonald's is rebranding, they're keeping things cleaner, they're making their bathrooms nicer. Whoa, somebody figured something out. Now it's going to take an investment. It's going to take a cultural shift for that McDonald's brand to kind of earn back the trust of people. And we were on the road. I was on the road yesterday for 7 hours. We stopped at Chick-fil-A when we were on the road because I knew that there was going to be a bathroom tent just outside the bathroom that said, sorry, the floor is wet. It wasn't wet because of what was on the floor. It was wet because they cleaned it. Mm-hmm. And that's how we have to think. It's like, that's capacity. It's the little things about execution that matter. Just because they have the same Heinz ketchup doesn't mean that the dispenser is going to be clean. But they both have the capability to do it, right?
Right.
But it's the little things about execution and demonstration of their abilities in the moment that is capacity.
Well, speaking of this execution side of things, I know that you're very big on the development of habits and building this Mindside Manifesto. A lot of this boils down to what are the things that you do on a daily basis to sharpen your sword, if you would say that. What are the things that make people successful? It's not like these things happen overnight. And I believe you've got some steps or things that you say are guaranteed habits that people that are successful or to be successful, these are some steps that you should or could take on a daily basis. What are those?
Yeah, and real quick, you brought up the manifesto again. I want to cover exactly why I called it that. It's just like I said earlier, a manifesto is a strongly held belief. It's a vision of a mindset. It sometimes has a negative connotation because usually when we think of the word manifesto, it's because some guy did something crazy and the police went back to his house and there was a letter that said, "This is my manifesto." Okay. But really what that is that was their public declaration of how they view the world. We can do the same thing. And until we're willing to declare what we believe in, it's really not a declaration. It's a hope. But the best of the best athletes, the best businesses, they'll flat out tell you, this is what I believe. And you know, whether you like it or not, I don't care, but this is what I believe. And for us to be successful, our mindset has to reach that level of a manifesto. But we also have to do things, right? And that's why I know the law of attraction gained a lot of attention back in the 2000s. But the problem was it didn't talk about what you had to do. It didn't say the little things about, like, there's a law of doing. You've got to have activity, you got to have work, you got to have a plan, you got to do things. And so when I started looking at what the best of the best do, there's 5 things that the best of the best do, and I'm around some of the best coaches in the game. Every day, and people will say that they're almost regimented to a fault. And what they do is they do administrative work every single day. They take time proactively to knock off the tasks that need to be knocked off first. So whether it's the first thing in the morning, they get up, they may exercise, and they go to the office, they sit down, they make a list of what they need to do during the day, and then they systematically do it. And administrative tasks are things that are between now and like the next 3 to 4 weeks, that things need to be done. But the problem with administrative tasks is they're menial for a lot of us. They're just going about business. And so as a result, we tend to just kind of put them off. But we put them off to such a degree that we end up resenting them, or they take and steal more psychological power from us. Because we're driving down the road and go, oh man, I forgot to pay that bill. Yeah. Oh God, I forgot to send that email back. Okay. So something that's so small that can actually create a dopaminergic surge in us by getting things done is actually creating an anxiety wear and tear on us. We don't need to be doing that. So the best of the best, what they do is they go, these are the things I need to do today, and they get them done. Okay. Then the second thing that they do is every day they do developmental tasks. Developmental tasks are 3 weeks to 3 months out. So if you're a business, that's planning, but you need to do it every day. You don't need to go to an offsite and have a planning meeting, because that's a full investment of a day that never gets followed through on, by the way. But you need to do it every day. And so I keep a notebook on my desk of things that I want to do and things that I'm trying and what I'm doing to working towards it. That's thinking down the horizon. But those developmental tasks will move into administrative tasks at some point. But if we wait to the last minute to try to create, if you're a golf coach and you're listening to this and you're trying to think about spring break plans, and you send out a newsletter to your juniors a week and a half before spring break to sign up for your camp, and that's the first they've heard of because that's the first you put it together, what's the likelihood of success? Very small.
Right.
But if you start right now saying, well, it's January, I don't have a whole lot of lessons right now, but I'm going to spend a little time planning my 6 months and when I'm going to send out things, and all of a sudden those administrative tasks become executions, okay, that are high level, high value, and high strategic, but I'm going to get them done. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time and effort because I can do the things that I need to do when I'm in a clear mind and purpose and focus. Okay. Then we need to do training tasks every single day. Every day we need to be working to improve who we are and what we are. whether that's listening to your podcast or my podcast or Jason Glass's podcast or Tim Ferriss's podcast, or going online and watching TED Talks or watching motivational videos, or picking up a book and saying, I'm going to read a chapter today. That's all I'm going to read. I'm just going to read a chapter, but I'm going to try to understand it. My dad used to tell a story about a professor that he had in college that every day would go into the dictionary and pick out a word. And he would use that word throughout the course of the day to learn how to increase his vocabulary. That's a training task. Okay. And it's actually a really good idea, but it's like, if we don't apply what we train on, then how is it going to ever be recalled?
Right.
So reason why in your field and my field, right, before we were doing this, training is pretty intense because we've got to learn to do it right, because it means a lot if you don't do it right. Okay. So we have to train, but oftentimes we abandon training until, we feel like we're behind the eight ball, and then we start rallying. But the best of the best, they train every day, train every single day. The fourth thing we have to do is we have to learn how to execute. And that goes back to the capacity discussion. We have to get in a spot where we are training ourselves how to execute in the moment. And we have to get up and get after it. And we have to execute what we say we're going to execute on. So if there's a period of the day and you're planning out your day and it's like, okay, from 2 to 6, I'm going to write my book. Okay. That's execution. Or from 2 to 6, I've got people in the clinic and I'm going to be, but when I'm there from 2 to 6, I'm working on executing and being the best person I can be, because I'm not sitting there worried about the things I forgot to do in my administrative tasks. I can be free of mind and free of focus. I can sharpen my sword, to use your phrase. Right. But the best time to sharpen a knife or a sword is when it's already sharp.
Right.
Because it just gets sharper.
What would you?
The final thing.
Sorry to jump in. So if you have a golfer, say the guy going out to the range, how did they practice that execution? Whether that be the range, the gym, the whatever it is. What are some suggestions that you have for that?
Well, getting out on the course, go play 3 or 4 holes. You don't have to play 9. Go play 3 or 4. There's 3 different places to train performance. There's in vitro, which is like in the lab or around the putting green or on the driving range. It's in the artificial environment. In vivo, go out and play on the course and practice out there. Drop 5 balls around the green, get the ball up and down, move to the next hole. Hit 3 balls off the tee, but you've got a purpose of training. And then the other one is simulation. Okay, so it might be, hey, let's go play 9 today and let's have a competition. Well, if I make a bad chip, I'm not going to drag the ball back and hit it again. Okay, I'm going to live it. If I poop my pants, I'm going to sit in it. And I got to learn how to deal with it.
Don't do that.
Okay, because But the fact is that we get so flustered by what we do in competition sometimes that we think, oh, it's okay, I'll fix it later. No, learn how to deal with it, because when you're in the real competition, you got to learn how to execute in the face of frustration. And if you can't learn how to execute in the face of frustration, you're never going to learn to execute when you have freedom.
Right.
And the final thing you got to do is you got to have time at the end of the day to review and reflect. You got to put a bow on the end of every day. And before you leave the office, don't just turn off the lights, run in the car, and all of a sudden get on the phone. Take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's only 1% of your day. And sit down and go, okay, take a few notes, kind of building your administrative tasks for the next day. But it gives you a chance to review and reflect kind of the learnings. Look, life is about learning. It's about growth. It's not about surviving. Remember what I said early on, too many of us are living life by a survival mentality, just getting by. We're letting life live us. We got to live life. And if you do those 5 things every day, you'll be amazed at the efficiency and the execution that happens.
The fifth one there, the review and reflect, is one that I've really taken notice of over the last year, 2 years, whatever, but especially when I've talked to either some of my clients or some of the highest level golfers that I've come across. And just in conversation, we'll be talking, and I've noticed that many of them will say, yeah, well, when I'm doing my post-round review or, just jotting down some notes about how things went or, writing down my stats. And these are the guys that you can just tell, like they get it, they understand it, they know that at the end, they're just taking the time. In 5 minutes, you fill out your scorecard, you write down a few notes, but they realize the importance of okay, let me just kind of slow down and see how things went, whether that be in the practice session or in a full round or competition round. And I've really noticed myself personally, kind of really after we had a conversation at the World Golf Fitness Summit, have made much more of an attempt to, at the end of my day, just sit down and kind of jot out what went well today. What are some things that can change tomorrow to improve what I have to do tomorrow. And it's amazing when you just take that 5-10 minutes to just sit down, slow down, because we never do. We always just kind of turn on the TV or, do whatever, listen to a podcast or whatever in your car. But you take that couple of minutes and just kind of say, okay, what was good today? What was bad today? How can I change that? And whether that's on the golf course, in your business, in your family life, it has made a huge impact in my own personal life.
Awesome. I love to hear it. And it's so true. I had an athlete one time tell me, I don't like to look at stats. I said, why? Well, they're just frustrating. If you're not willing to review what you are, you're living an illusion, right?
Yeah.
And when is that illusion going to come crashing down? When it's under the most pressure. I want to know, at the end of the day, that was a hard day. To go back to physicians, that's why they do, what do they call it, M&Ms, morbidity and mortality conferences. It's not that if they have a bad outcome, they're sitting up there and they're afraid to get in front of peers. The reason they're doing it is so they can learn from it, and that other people can learn from it if they have a bad outcome. Okay? It doesn't mean that we're going to sit up there and chastise. Yeah, it's probably painful. And I know I've had some outcomes with clients that, the client didn't succeed and I'm frustrated about it, but I had to sit down and go through it and figure it out. And yeah, maybe I was at fault. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe it was completely random. And it was just a factor that I couldn't control or the client couldn't control, and it just didn't work out between us. But if I'm not willing to take a look to be continuously improving what I'm doing, I'm fooling it. I'm fooling myself. I'm creating an illusion. And that review and reflection is an investment that we're making back into ourselves. And sometimes it's hard. But the best of the best aren't afraid to look and with a critical eye at themselves, not a critiquing eye of frustration and negative self-talk, but how can I do this better? Because the best of the best are never content with where they are. They always believe they can be better.
That's awesome. Doc, I love everything we've talked about. I can't wait for this book to officially launch. I know it's out. People can pre-order, and we'll kind of tell them where to go in a little bit. But so much great information, and just like you said, what I love about your work and your speaking is how deep you dive into some of these subjects. So for everybody out there, this is going to be a must-read book. I want to have a little fun before we go, though. It's been kind of a serious conversation that we've had this entire time. So a couple rapid-fire questions at the end here that we're calling the John Daly round now. The John Daly rapid-fire round. First, you've had so many different experiences with different athletes over the years. I want to know, just because this is a golf podcast, what's the coolest golf-related experience you've had since you were on the podcast last 2 years ago?
Since I was on the podcast last 2 years ago, it's a good question. I would actually say watching 2 years ago, my oldest daughter was finishing her high school career. And I got to see somebody who went from, who really struggled with confidence to coming in second in sectionals because she believed in what she was doing and played really great, and then saw the culmination of her high school career. And now watching that happen with my daughter, my youngest one, who's finding her pathway and has really embraced physical training and loves to go to the gym and work out. And seeing the improvements there, that's been really cool. From another golf perspective, for me personally, I think I've had a player on tour walk up to me on the range and go, "Love your stuff." He said, "I've been a lurker for a long time." He's not a client. I doubt he'll ever be a client. But it was somebody that I looked at and I thought, "Damn, that's really cool." And this guy just walked up to me and said, "I'm just a big fan of what you do." And I said, "Well, thank you." And he said, "I'm a big fan of what you do because you handle it the right way. You have the credentials, and yet you're approachable, and you make it seem normal." And he said, "I just want to thank you for that."
Wow.
And that was cool. That was a really nice compliment. And now whenever I see him, we always talk about other stuff. But Like I said, I'm not trying to get him as a client. I'll probably never have him as a client. That's cool. That's fine. But I know I think when we're in our business, we always want to make an impact on the people beyond just who we can make a direct impact on. And I think that was a pretty cool statement.
That's awesome. I can't remember if I asked you this. I probably didn't ask you this question as early on in the podcast as you were on. But if you had a chance to play 18 holes of golf with anyone in the world, past, present, future, doesn't have to be in the world of golf, who would it be? Why would you play with them? And where would you play?
I'm not going to do the traditional. My father passed away 5 years ago. I would rather go to a baseball game with him, and go back to the College World Series and sit and watch those games. And I'll pass like the big historical figures. If I had to play golf with anybody, I would probably want to. It would be interesting is to go play golf with a designer. And somebody like a Pete Dye, and understand the nuances of what they were trying to capture. Like, why do tee boxes face the way they do? What are they trying to capture? The details of the moment. That would be fascinating to me. Is to be out on a golf course and look at the nuances. Like I love architecture. I don't know anything about it. But I love going to cities that have high energy but different architecture. I love going to New Orleans for that reason. I love going to New York City. I love Vegas. And so golf courses to me are often like that, is to look at that uniqueness of why they would create what they would create. Where would I play? I haven't actually done the top 100 run. I haven't. I'm a member of a great golf course in Birmingham. I live a 7-iron away from Shoal Creek. Played it once, top 100 course. It was all right. I love where I play, and 36 holes of different type of golf, and but I would love to, I've never been to Pebble, even though I know there's a tour event there. It's just somewhere else I don't go. I'll go when my kids are in college and my wife can come with me. So I would want to look at I'd like to ask the designer, what's the coolest place that he would take me to show me the uniqueness of the event? Because I think that'd be fascinating. That's why I love like different baseball parks. Don't give me a multi-purpose stadium. Give me something unique.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that'd be awesome I would love to have a designer on the show just to kind of go through that mental process of what they're doing out there, what they try to achieve, and how they try to fool our eyes when we step on those tee boxes. All right,
yeah,
so
absolutely.
You and I had a chance to have a little lunch in New Orleans, and you took me to I can't remember the name of the place. What was the name of the place that we went?
I can't remember, but it was right next to the Marriott. It was fantastic, but I can't remember, the Cajun House or something like that.
Yeah, something like so. That was really my first experience with some Cajun food, New Orleans style. If you could only eat one last meal from New Orleans, what would it be?
A hot roast beef po' boy with gravy. The fried seafood. Whenever I go to Louisiana, I always get a fried seafood platter once. You know me, I'm a big guy. I mean, got to lose weight, but you can't get good fresh seafood that's broiled, cooked, that's not been frozen, has a completely different taste. And I always will eat those when I'm there. And then I always get a fried seafood platter at one point, just because I love fried fish and fried oysters and fried shrimp. I always feel terrible afterwards, but it's one of those things that you got to do it when you're in New Orleans.
Right.
But one of the hardest things to create that only they do in New Orleans. I know other people say we have hot roast beef out. No. A true hot roast beef po' boy. It has got the perfect French bread. It's a perfect cut of a certain type of roast beef that we have in Louisiana with a good gravy. And it has to be hot. It has to be, a 10 to 15 napkin po' boy, where it's slathering all over you. But the bread, the toughness of the French bread, where you have to kind of work to get through it, mixing with the meat and that gravy, that's what you do. And people who aren't from Louisiana don't understand, but in Louisiana, there's po' boy stands and there's daiquiri stands on every corner in every restaurant. But in Louisiana, you better have good po' boys, because that's what you're measured on. And it's the quality of the ingredients that matter. And it doesn't mean it has to be expensive. It's just the quality of how your bread is and how the meat is. Don't go cheap. Don't cut a corner, because we'll figure it out quickly. Right. But if you got a little bit of that lagniappe in there, a little bit of something extra, a little bit of love in it, there's nothing better.
All right, now I know what I'm ordering next time I go.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, one last final question, Doc. What's the last piece of advice you have for the 18 Strong listeners here? And then how can we support you with the Mindside Manifesto and the book? When does it come out?
Last piece of advice is we got to transform our life into living. And whatever we do, whether it's competitive environment, business, whatever, don't be afraid to be urgent. Don't be afraid to be pushy. Don't be afraid to be fighting for something you believe in. There's too many naysayers. There's too many people who share their own fears on us. Can't do this, can't do that. I shouldn't be able to do that. If you truly believe what you want and you set a plan to achieve it and you live it with everything you have, you're going to be successful. There's a quote that's in the back of the book that was something that we lived every single day when I played baseball, it was a quote by Paul Mayer. Said that anything that you ardently desire, sincerely believe in, vividly imagine, enthusiastically act upon must come to pass. The idea is that something that you really, really want is something that you see yourself doing, that you're willing to make the sacrifices to achieve it, and you're willing to work your ass off to do it. It's got to come to pass. It's got to happen. And too many of us are waiting, just like I fall into the trap of waiting for somebody to make it happen for me. It's not about who's going to make it happen. It's about I'm going to make it happen. And if for us to really, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I'd like to have more business in my golf practice. I'd like to have more business in my fitness practice. I'd like to have more people here. Then you know what? Stop complaining what everyone else is doing and be better. I had a friend of mine who owns a Toyota dealership, and he says, everybody always yells and screams at me because they think I have the best location in town. He said, when I bought it, it was the lowest producing Toyota in the state in the same location. But I changed the processes and I created a culture. I changed the way that we were compensated. I hired great people to be sales reps, paid them salaries. I took a risk, and now I'm the number one in the Southeast. And yet nobody has adopted my game plan. Why? And I said, because they're afraid to do it. And he said, exactly.
Yep.
And yet he's laid it out for you. Look, everyone transfers our fears onto somebody else because we're afraid to do it. Don't waste time on that. Set a plan for what you want to accomplish and get after it. If you want to buy a copy of the Mindside Manifesto, I appreciate you letting me do that. Go to Amazon.com. Just type in the Mindside Manifesto. It's a blue book with a clock on it. Can't miss it. And I'd appreciate your feedback. My goal is just like you said. There's an anxiety of putting a book out there, and I have no problem if somebody says I read it, didn't get it, just did not resonate with me. That's fine. I appreciate that. Tell me why. But if you do, and you do find it that it resonates with you, tell me why. Because to me, the book was a book from my heart. It was something that I believe in greatly. It's an exposing, we in human life, we struggle with vulnerability. This is, as you know, writing a book and doing a podcast, it makes us vulnerable. And it's a scary place to be. So any feedback would be great.
Awesome. Well, Doc, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show again, and just for all the amazing work that you're doing in the world of golf, sports, the mental game, just the podcast. I mean, everything you do, I'm a big fan of. You know that, and I look forward to continuing to just kind of pick each other's brains on some of these different topics and just learn from each other as we move forward. But congratulations on the book. I know how scary that is to put that out there, and it's going to be a huge, huge success. I have no doubt in my mind. So thanks again for coming on, and we will definitely be talking in the very near future.
Well, thanks for having me again, and to all continued success of 18 Strong.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining me on the 18 Strong podcast this week. And if you want any more information on Dr. McCabe or the Mindside Manifesto, you can go to themindside.com or go to 18strong.com and search for episode number 122 with Dr. Bhrett McCabe, or you can type in Bhrett in the search bar. It'll pop right up. You'll get both of his interviews there, where you can find out everything that we talked about here in the show, as well as in episode number 6. Don't forget to check out Super Speed Golf. I'm telling you guys, this stuff is the real deal, the overspeed training, and it's the top overspeed training system in the world, and that's why everybody's starting to use them. Go to superspeedgolf.com to get your hands on those. Use the code 18Strong. And if you aren't a regular listener of 18 Strong and want to subscribe to the podcast, you can easily do so, finding us on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your preferred method of listening is, whatever app you use, whatever phone you use. Just go ahead and search for 18 Strong, and we're in all of the different search directories. I want to thank you again for joining me here this week, and we look forward to so many more great guests coming up. In fact, because the mission here is to kind of go outside the box of the regular golf and fitness education, we're going to bring in some experts from different fields, different sports, different worlds, basically, and utilize some of the things that they've either learned or that they're training other individuals in to help you with everything that you're looking for in your journey, whether that be mental game, whether that be fitness, whether that be health. So as a little teaser, I mean, we've got NFL players coming on. We've got a Navy SEAL sniper that is going to be coming on in the near future. And I'm not going to say who, but there might even be a couple PGA Tour players in the mix in the next couple of months. So a lot of exciting things happening here at 18 Strong. So I'm telling you, make sure you do not miss any of the upcoming episodes. All right, I will catch up with you next week. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.